Now, I know what a lot of people are going to think when they see this. They're going to be like, oh, well, he's a pirate, so blast him. But here's a poor guy who's fallen out of his ship that's hovering above the ground because he didn't turn his engines off, and he's stuck. Most people would think, oh, the pirate's going to take advantage. He's going to blast him. But this is like kind of like a turned over turtle on the side of the road or on the beach or something like that. Nah, we're going to help this guy out. We're going to be nice. But it's these kinds of things that when you're thinking about Star Citizen, these are the kind of situations that kind of come up that you don't really think about when you're thinking about playing the game. These are the kind of bummer situations that pop up. And, you know, we can do little things here and there as players to kind of help people out with these unfortunate occurrences, but there are certain things that, you know, we can overcome, and they kind of happen at the design level. Recently, CIG revealed the fact that the Nova tank is in production. Of course, the Nova tank is going to arrive, luckily, after the Hercules, so you'll be able to use the Nova tank, you know. Unlike the Ballista, which is kind of tethered right now to any landing site where you can spawn it, in the future, with the Hercules arriving in game, you can move the Ballista and you can move the Nova tank when it arrives to the locations that you need them. Now, hopefully that comes with a much more interesting gameplay, you know, going to landing sites and having to kind of take them over. Realistically, I could see that if you wanted to, you could land a Nova tank outside of the turrets, protecting certain landing sites, and you could drive the tank in and blow up the turrets with the tank, and that could be a lot of fun. And that could be really interesting. So you'd think that someone like me, someone who plays a bit of World of Tanks here and there, would be extra excited to engage with that type of gameplay, but it's actually quite the opposite for me. And the reason why is it's the idea of having to get the Hercules to bring that vehicle anywhere. It's the logistical concerns. When I look at my pirate life in Star Citizen, and I kind of predict and interpret where things are going to go, and I kind of, it's so to speak, invest my money accordingly, the Nova tank is just so far removed from the picture of reality. It's kind of like it's an idealization to go out and do that, but the practical reality is that I would never have the patience or the time or the logistical train, nor would I invest in it just to deliver a main battle tank to the ground and then pick it back up again once the mission's done. I'm going to be living a very nomadic life in Star Citizen, and so having to kind of haul all these things around is a big concern, and it's definitely something that I've confronted over the years, especially around the time of the anniversary sales. Is it's just like I have so many ships, and I start to think about how am I going to move all this stuff around. Maybe it's a good idea when things like the Perseus come up or things like, you know, the Polaris come up. Maybe it's better to just kind of melt a whole bunch of stuff and just consolidate into one or two places, one or two big places. But the truth of it is that I really do honestly believe that most of my life is going to be spent flying like a Corsair or a Star Runner. And most of the other ships are probably going to spend most of their time sitting in a hangar collecting dust, waiting for their particular situations to be used. And the truth of it is that a Nova tank just is probably going to spend 99.99999% of its own life, in my possession at least, in storage, waiting for an opportunity to be used. And the truth of it is that, as we've seen recently, the price of ground vehicles in Star Citizen in terms of UEC is negligible. It's kind of a joke. So there's better places to spend your money than on that vehicle. Someone like me who enjoys games built around tanks and stuff like that is, you know, would normally be very excited to kind of engage with that. But the truth of it is that it really, when I think about the logistical train involved in moving that thing from here to there, it takes the fun out of it for me, really. It's kind of confronting that reality. And that's where a lot of these videos kind of come from, is it's the idea of confronting the reality of what the system is actually going to be, what this is actually going to feel like. And I feel that, you know, as we saw with the Perseus Q&A recently, that when the artists are building the ships for Star Citizen, especially, they kind of get a little sheet from Chris Roberts, a little write-up, and says, this ship should kind of look like this. This is kind of what I want it to look like. These are the capabilities I mainly want it to have. Go. Make the ship, right? And so they're going like, okay, so I submit a collage of all these different designs that Chris Roberts kind of picks 2 or 3 out that he kind of likes, and then I kind of try to blend those together, and I show it to Chris again, and goes like, oh yeah, that's got the right shape language, change these colorings, change this markings, make sure that the manufacturer is labeled on 98% of all the surfaces within the ship, because if you don't hit that 98%, Chris is going to reject the design. Things like that. And so when they're going through that process, I think that one of the big problems is that the artists aren't really in touch with the practical day-to-day concerns of the game, and that's where a lot of these omissions like weapon racks or toilets or storage lockers that are big enough to accommodate armor, they kind of fall by the wayside, and they get these questions and these concerns get artfully dodged with the idea of, well, it's game balance. And it's kind of disguised as game balance, but I think that real game balance, when we're talking about, let's say this ship is so fast, but this ship is so much more maneuverable. This ship is so much slower, but it's so much more heavily armored. That's where we're talking about game balance. But the idea of excluding certain systems from certain ships, just, not because of their size, because you have a ship like the Perseus, which is obviously very sizable, when you're disguising those omissions as game balance, instead of what it really is, which is, we didn't think of it. It wasn't immediately on the sheet that Chris Roberts gave us, so we didn't think of it, and now we're just going to say, oh, we didn't do it because it was game balance reasons. That's honestly what I read into a lot of those comments when I read the Q&As, when I see CIG's responses, is there are valid responses out there, and then there are the other responses which are just like, I'm just looking for an excuse to get away from the fact that I forgot some things when I designed the ship. I wasn't thinking about certain things, and now I'm kind of trapped. So lore reason, go. Bang. That's why it doesn't have a medical bay, because it relies on the rest of the fleet. But it's a patrol ship. So it goes out on patrol, but only with the other ships in the fleet. Okay. Not really sure about that. It doesn't have to be a full medical suite. It can just be a bed. When you start to confront the actual realities, when you actually play Star Citizen and not just design things for it, but actually play the game, you start to kind of come into contact with a lot of things in Star Citizen that are going to become a problem in the future. Now, one of Star Citizen's biggest flaws currently is the fact that physicalized goods don't exist. Now, that isn't a jab at CIG, because there's a lot of things that got to be finished for this game, and full physicalized, armor, weapons, and all this stuff like that is just not on the table right now. Though I feel that in order to build a better picture in people's minds of what the game is going to be, I feel that it should almost be at the top of the list. That it should be almost like at the front of the line. Simply because I feel that the game as it's played right now, I'm very concerned that it's giving the wrong idea of how the game is actually going to work. And we're playing with an almost very World of Warcraft type set of rules, where we just have these magic bags on our belt that hold like 6 sets of armor or 10 sets of guns and weapons and stuff like that. And we just wink things into existence whenever we want them. Much like, let's say you run your own survival game server and you're the admin, and you can just do a console command and say, give me an axe, give me a hammer, that sort of stuff. I think we're getting a little too used to having these things like that in Star Citizen. And what that's actually doing is it's creating a false impression of what day-to-day life in the game is actually going to be like. And I think that there's a lot of players and some designers, if I'm going to be completely honest, who don't fully appreciate the day in and day out, real life concerns of the players. And that's where you get all these kind of like blind spots when they're designing these ships. I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is they don't, because these systems are so delayed and so behind, that nobody really has an appreciation or the imagination to kind of see how much of a problem these things are going to be in the future, especially if you build ships, forget things, and then just kind of make up an excuse and then walk away from it and just kind of like, well, done and done, on to the next ship. It's not, a lot of these ships are going to end up having to be dragged back and redesigned and worked over again and again and again to build them to the specs that the game is going to need. A recent example of this, and this is actually an example with a lot of history in Star Citizen, but going back a few years, there was a bit of a controversy around this ship, the Cutlass. There was a lot of angst in the community because the original Cutlass, the old school Cutlass, it handled like the old school Vanguard. It handled like a pig. And we all remembered the Cutlass commercial where it was shown being agile and flipping around in space and, flipping off a Van Duel pilot at the same time. And it was all very fun and very cool. But the actual Cutlass handled horribly. It was very slow and very piggish, and it was not all that great of a ship. So the Cutlass was originally built as a very nimble ship, but in game it turned out to be not quite so. As a result of that, the Cutlass was kind of split two ways, and the Buccaneer came to us. Now, one of the things about the Buccaneer that was not promised, underline that statement, it was not promised, but it was indicated that it was likely that they were going to try to make sure that the Buccaneer could carry a little bit of cargo and some extra weapons for the player. Now, that never materialized. So an external weapon rack on the Buccaneer never materialized, though the community and CIG have kind of engaged in aggressive commentary towards one another about this time and time again. It was always like, oh, well, we don't know where to fit it, and we can't do it. If we can't do it, so we're not going to do it, and we can't do it. Fast forward 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden CIG realizes that when they're going down to do the FPS missions in Squadron 42, they realize that because of the physicalized nature of the Star Citizen game, the way it's going to be is that you can't walk around with large caliber weapons strapped to your back when you're flying a ship. You're going to have to be snug in that chair. So the guns that are sitting on your back, whether it's a missile launcher or a shotgun or whatnot, aren't going to fit. And maybe certain armors aren't going to fit inside of the cockpit either. CIG realized this, like this thing that players had been saying to them for years. CIG realized too late that the players were right, and they were going to have to go back to the Gladius's original design and build a weapons rack, an external weapon rack, into the Gladius in order to do the FPS missions in Squadron 42. Now, players had told CIG about this and revealed this concern through the Buccaneer years before, but CIG had just kind of blown those comments off, made a few smart remarks about this. And it was highly confrontational because the Buccaneer was a bit of a hot issue as well. It came from a hot issue and it kind of became a hot issue. But lo and behold, yes, years later, CIG went, oh, no, we got to put external weapon racks on. And so this is now kind of becoming the norm. Because they didn't fully appreciate when they were designing it and they were coming up with their artistic ideal of what the ship should be. They really didn't want to be flexible in order to address the concerns, what they thought were superficial concerns of the player base. But when they became practical, real, everyday concerns, they were kind of blown off, right? Until they became pertinent to Squadron 42, and then it was an issue that just had to be tackled right away, right? It had to be handled. We got to put weapon racks on the Gladius, so get it done. Well, what about the other ships, right? And this is kind of the problem that I have, when I'm reading things like the Perseus Q&A is, to be perfectly honest, I just see more of the same. It's just like, oh, no, for game balance reasons, for this reason, for that reason. The truth of it is it's the same reason why I don't own the Nova tank, is because there's an ideal version of it in our imaginations, and there's a real everyday version that we're going to have to deal with in the game, with all these mechanics in place and with physicalized armor and weapons and ship equipment and all this existing in the game. There's going to be some very real concerns in the future around this stuff. And I think that the game doesn't exist in a state that really reflects that for the players. And I think that that's a big concern. And that's why I feel that this should be a top priority, because as people come to grips with these issues and they start to realize how important they actually are in ship design, you're going to see a very real shift in the community and how they interact with CIG over ship design, because you're going to see a lot less, at least in my opinion, you're going to see a lot less threads about like, cross my arms, I'm not happy about this ship because I don't like the color scheme. I think the paneling should be marble, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see a lot of those comments die away, and they're going to be like, where's the bathroom? Where's the weapon storage locker? Where's my armor storage? Where's my bed? Why aren't all these things anticipated on a ship this size? And when I made that video and we were talking about the Perseus, there is no excuse to not have a basic medical bed and a basic armory in that ship. It doesn't need to be able to deliver a full platoon or a company of soldiers. It doesn't need that. But like a basic armory on any military ship should be a given from the beginning. And so that, if you think that way and you design that way, then you don't have to come up with a bunch of BS excuses when you write your Q&A. It's like, it's game balance. It's like, no, it isn't. It's forgetfulness and not wanting to have to go back and redo the work that you've already delivered. That's what it is. And it's that kind of thinking and it's that kind of realization on my end. That's the main reason why I don't own the Nova tank, is because I know that if I own it, it's going to be such a hassle to get it anywhere, to use it, to do anything, that it really just won't have that much practical value to me. It's easy when you see something to get swept up in it. Like, oh, that's going to be perfect. That's going to be my ticket to this. It's going to be my ticket to that. But you have to remember the practical concerns of Star Citizen, and doing your best to make sure you're not just blinded by the hype or a poorly designed console in the cockpit.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.